as I was talking about like developing like that, kind of riffing off of what you were talking about, which was that creation of like the system of magic, where again, like if you don't have everything that they say in the spell books, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do something with it. A lot of times it's about being able to adapt and adjust to what you have.
Hmm.
And you were mentioning, I think we did catch that part about Lon Milo Duquette and how he had mentioned that in the in his book. So yeah, I think it's a great example, like because you used the example earlier of the purple tarantula and being able to even just adapt it into your body, using your body as a magical tool. I mean, one of the things that I say is that your body is one of the primary magical tools, and in fact, it is the primary magical tool when it comes to developing a magical system.
Absolutely. And the other thing, and the reason I think music is such a great tool for magic is that the science, the neurological science on what how music affects the body and the mind is super interesting. And so it's very holistic, and you're using all your body and all your mind, and then that holism, I feel like, is what helps your entire being be a part of whatever it is you're trying. The other thing is that, like, I feel like once you get a result, you're able to really refine your techniques, and you are able to, like, you know what I mean, distill it down to its most simple. I think a lot of people go through the motions, and they follow the recipe to a T because they haven't gotten a result yet necessarily, and that they're maybe afraid that if they don't follow it to a T, they won't get the result. But I feel like one of the great examples of the Lon Milo Duquette example is he basically had like what seemed like a botched ritual, but it actually produced the result like pretty quickly after he did it. And so it's another like example of you don't need all the extra fanfare. If you get a result, you can definitely you can like distill it down to its essence, which I think is more important anyway. And then the other thing about results too is I feel like I get maybe a little bit too I want to plan too much, and then I'm not letting uh the mystery evolve, like it's very like I want to get this result, and the deja vu by design is so close to what I linked to, and that's great and that's super fun, but there's no mystery or mysticism. Sometimes I feel like I need that. And so it's to be more open, and to be less sort of detailed about what I want to happen. I feel like that's where I go, you know. So I'm not so like I don't even know what the word would be, but like almost anal retentive about what is going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one other point I wanted to make earlier too is that if you want to add stuff that's more complex, there is a reason to do it, and that's the aesthetic of it, right? There
Mhm.
can be like you said, like a ritual can be like a golden dawn or something like that can be a really beautiful ritual, but again, also balance it out with sensibility. I mean, for me, I didn't want to spend a lot of money as a kid. I didn't have a lot of money as a teenager on golden dawn paraphernalia. So
Mhm.
for me, it was kind of like, okay, like they're like, oh, you need to have like a gold staff or whatever. I'm like, "Uh, I'm 16 years old. I don't have enough money to buy gold, and I don't have any gold conveniently laying around. And if I did, my parents would probably kill me. So
Right.
I wasn't going to go and do that. And it was kind of an interesting experience of kind of being playing along the lines of recognizing like, okay, this is not going to necessarily be something that are going to do that aesthetic. But, being able to do exactly what you talked about, the result and saying, okay, well, I got a result. That's what really matters. I mean, and let me be very clear about that. When I say that it matters, I don't mean in the sense that it matters that you got the result itself, but what it really means is like the result is an indicator of what is or isn't working in magic. In my book, How to Troubleshoot Magic, one of the things that I talk about is how the result isn't the end of the magical journey. It is rather an indicator that the magical journey is working. And that even if you get no result, you've actually gotten a result. It's just telling you that what you're doing isn't working.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that too. And I feel like I also like the innocuous examples of things like parking spots because if your results are sort of ill-defined and grandiose, you won't really ever know if it happened or not, you know? And I feel like the cool thing about Deja Vu by design is there's no question. Like the way it works is that when that moment of deja vu by design happens, you're 99% sure that you influenced that. And that gives you confidence and agency to do it again. And honestly, that is mysterious in itself because why does that happen? Like, so if you think about why this might happen, is that your future selves spread out and your past selves spread out from moment of observation. The weird part is that moments are infinitesimally immediate, and so they're always morphing in and out of the future past waves of probability. And so, if you think about, there are more Taylors 5 years from now than there are 5 seconds from now, that 5 years from now tailors are more pliable, right? So you have more sculpting power over that. 5 seconds from now, 4, 3, 2, 1, here we are, right? Not much has changed, right? But 5 years ago, there are more selves, right? And so that's also pliable. That's also moldable. And so you get into things like retroactive enchantment, and really, like, that opens up a whole psychedelic world in itself to think about that. And I feel like we have a spatial bias inculcated in our language, which is actually survival based. But if notice, like, when people start talking about the future past, they talk about it as there's like some container out there in the future, right? In the future or in the past. But the future and the past aren't some container out there that we're going to get to. They are waves of probability. And so Aborigines have this concept of the every when. And so what I think you do, I think the every when is analogous to the imagination. So creating that imaginal link, it links you to a future self in the every when, and then it almost like draws that, probability permitting, it draws that to you. And so, to me, that pliability, that sculptability, and that realizing that the future and the past aren't anywhere, but they're every when, that allowed that. I realized why linking might actually work. And so that also helped me sort of refine my techniques.
Yeah. This reminds me a little bit of the anthropologist Edward T. Hall, who wrote quite a bit about the anthropology of time. So he went to different cultures and explored it. And I agree with you, like the languaging around time can be very limiting in some ways, especially the English languaging around time, because it is very much based on tense. And it's a very linear notion of time. And it almost ends up being a case where you have to kind of consider like how we're going to break that wide open. And one of the things that I liked with his work is that he also really looked at it from the perspective of time being, whether time was monochronic or polychronic. So like in the US or like in Western cultures, time is typically treated as monochronic. Like we say, okay, we're going to do this at X time. That's when we're going to do it. And it's going to be you and me, and it's not going to be anything else. Whereas if we go into like, we'll just say like South America or Latin America, what we'll find is that there is polychronic time where it's kind of like, all right, we're going to meet, we might meet at this time. It might be actually at this time, and there may be multiple people coming through. And it actually is inclusive of multiple probability waves more so than the English language allows for. So I think sometimes being able to either adapt that kind of mindset or perspective can be really helpful for the space-time magic work. And can really just be helpful in general in terms of exploring and creating different systems of magic, because what we're doing is we're opening the door to allowing possibilities to come into play.
Yeah.
I noticed that we've had some people rejoin us, or a couple new people join us. So we're doing a part two here because we had technical difficulties with Substack. I don't, which kind of sucks. That is what it is. I like doing these lives though because it's more engaging. For any of you who have questions or comments about what we're talking about, feel free to drop those in the comment area, and I'll read them aloud and share them. I always encourage that kind of participation on these live interviews. And something, an area that I kind of wanted to explore a little bit with you was also the concept of vibration. When we talk about making music, we might think of it as sound, but it's also vibration. So, what are some of your thoughts around playing with vibration when you can't necessarily hear it, but you can, but we can't hear the sound of it, but we still hear it. Maybe
Mm,
we bring that a little bit.
yeah. So at one point I was in touch with a vibroacoustic therapist, and do you know what that is? Vibroacoustic
Oh,
therapy.
tell us about that.
So there are these beds, and I think they have now where it doesn't need to be a whole bed. There's other technology, but it works on certain hertz and what those hurts do to your body. And so their theory is that certain ailments can be cured by certain hertz, right? And so 140 hertz might work for headaches, whereas another number might work for stomach issues. But you don't hear it. It's all resonance. It's all vibration. And so there's another cool example of cat purring. So they this is scientific. You can look this up. That cat's purr actually helps regenerate bones, and I think other things as well. But that's again, and it's more the way it actually vibrates your bones. So it's not oral or aural, it's all physical, right? And so it's the way that the vibrations and the certain frequencies work on your systems that actually can is super healing.
No, that makes sense to me. And in my own system of space time magic, I've played a lot with vibration. One of the goetic spirits that I've worked with for a very long time, Prasan, he depicted as having a horn. Well, when I started working with him, one of the first things that he actually shared with me was the idea of working with time as a vibration. So I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of that vibratory aspect, because I mean, really, we're dealing with that on multiple levels of our being. It's not just the case of, in this case, like y'all can hear me talking right now. Of course, that's vibration being turned into sound. But there are those subtle layers. Like dogs, for example, we blow a dog whistle. A dog can hear that more so, or we can hear that, but we still hear it as well. We just don't physically acknowledge the sound, at
Hmm.
least on a sound level, but that doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge it on some level in our bodies.
Hmm.
And so we live in this world of vibration that is occurring around us all the time, and all these other sensations and experiences. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's so good to develop an awareness outside of magic itself, of like some of the different operating principles and the disciplines and the concepts and ideas that people have about how life in this universe and world works. Because if you have, and again, a lot of it is ultimately like it's supposition. We can say, well, we've observed this enough times, that we think that this is the case, but it still gives us a framework to work with and play with and test and challenge. I mean, sometimes it's fun to just try and break those rules.
That's true. Absolutely. Well, and the interesting thing about vibration too and frequency is that if 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 your future past selves, and there's lots of experiments that you can do that sort of like will show this, if they are waves of probability like you hear about in quantum physics, then those are frequencies. So you could almost say that the 5 second from now, you is a frequency until it collapses and it becomes matter, and then it turns back into a frequency, and so you were always like morphing in and out of frequency. And so like what is hum? Humming is like one of the best things you could do. It's just to work your body over with your own voice is really amazing. And it's like it's probably one of my favorite meditations is just to like sit there and just to hum. It helps in breathing. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of French doctor named Alfred Tomati, but he did a whole lot of work with monks. And so I guess after the Second Vatican Council, they did away with monks chanting. They didn't have a chanting regimen anymore. And in this one abbey, they started getting sick. And so the guy who ran it started calling in doctors to figure out why these monks were sick. So Alfred Tomati came in and he says, well, what's their chanting schedule? And he's like, yeah, we did away with that. He's like, get him chanting again. And so he goes into this, and you'll have to research it on your own because I'm not as up to date on it as I used to be. But there's this thing called cortical charge that happens with long tones. So when you use your own voice to hold out long tones, either singing or humming, your whole brain fires up and your body relaxes. And so you're in this cool state, almost like a flow state of heightened awareness, but relaxed physiology. And to me, I'm just like, if anything, that's where I want to be when I'm trying to create magic.
Oh yeah, and that flow state is always optimal, right? So that makes sense. That's a fascinating story that I'll have to look into. I mean, I'm familiar with a lot of different sound stuff because, again, it's one of my areas of interest and passion. So, but I hadn't heard that particular story, but I like it. I mean, that's really cool. It's a good example, again, of something that we might take for granted in our lives, but nonetheless plays a significant role
Mm.
in our health. And really, I mean, I think in general, just kind of looking at health, the more engaged you are with your body and all the different physiology and different forms and manners, the more that it actually can help you with your health, and certainly with your magical work.
Hmm.
I want to come back to a point that we made in the previous broadcast before things kind of got disrupted, which was around results. Uh, and I think it's kind of the point that I was making at the time was that a result is like it's like an indicator of where you're going.
Mm.
It's not just the end. It's not just the end. Like if we think of the result as just the end that we're trying to get to, we're actually limiting our magic in a lot of ways. And the way that I look at it is that if I get a result, there's a ripple from that result. There are consequences that come out of it. There's things that change, patterns, probabilities, whatever else. And at some point, I may need to do some more magic to address some of those things. But it's not even just that. The result does indicate, is the magic working? If you're
Mm.
doing a magical working and you don't get the result, it's just going to tell you, okay, there's something here that I need to go back into and take a look at. There's something maybe I didn't understand. Maybe it had some needless complexity. Maybe there was internal resistance. It could be any of those things.
Mhm.
And so getting clear on that and being able to use the result as a guideline to lead into further inquiry and getting curious about what the result tells you can be a really good diagnostic way of refining your magical working and also developing your overall system of magic.
Definitely, and I like to go for small results, because, like, so one of my favorite results was, I'm a gigging musician, and I played downtown Denver, and, I looked at the weather. I had a gig coming up in 3 days. It was gonna be shitty, snowy weather, and the venue that I was playing, there is, like, the prized parking spot, like, right outside, and you can see it from stage. So 3 days before, I'm like, "I need that parking spot." So I put on some music, laid down in my bed, and I just visualized myself playing the drums on stage, looking out the window, and my car is in that spot. And so then the night of the gig, I'm driving, it's snowy, pull up, car's there. All right, go around. It's downtown, so you got to do this huge loop around. Go around, still there. I don't care. Go around again. Car pulls out. I pull in. And then while I'm playing, I look over at the window and there's my car, and it's so exact to the visualization I had when I was laying down 3 days before that I really had no choice but to be like, this is deja vu. Like, it's so close to what I visualized. And I didn't give up. I didn't like find another parking spot because I'm like, that one's taken. I'm just like, whatever it is, I'm doing it. And so that result is one of my favorites because it's innocuous. I mean, it was a parking spot, like who cares, but it was nice and easy because then after the gig, I would just like load my drums up right there. And the deja vu feeling is like this really kind of fun, visceral, like uh goosebumpy kind of thing.
Well, it creates a sense of wonder and awe, right? I mean, that's how I feel when I have a deja vu experience or anything along those lines. And for me, it was fascinating. I went up and visited the first time I visited my beloved, and we went and like I flew up to Vancouver and then um, I hung out there a few days, and then we went to her hometown in Castlegar. I was amazed at how familiar that place seemed to me. I had never been there before. I
Mm,
never traveled there, but nonetheless, it felt really familiar. It felt like I had been there. And so
hmm
there was that deja vu aspect playing out in a very real and visceral sense that this place that I had never been nonetheless felt very familiar. And I've had
hmm
that experience with other places, like the house that I'm in right now. When I was house hunting, I actually took a break for a little while, and then I came back to I decided to look again. It felt like the right time. And the very first house I came to was this house, and it just was like instantly like I knew this was the place. Like, yep, I told my realtor we're gonna go for it. And it just felt like this deep sense of knowing. So I mean, whether it's a parking spot or some other kind of experience, I think paying attention to that sense, that uncanny sense of there's something here,
hmm
allowing that to flow through and fully trusting it, that becomes its own kind of psychic awareness
hmm
that plays out and actually lends its power to the manifesting of the result.
Yeah, definitely. And so when I first started getting into deja vu, I started collecting stories. And the stories I collected were pretty amazing. And it gives you this real sense that we have the ability for precognition, that it's almost like the everyone houses all possibilities, and that if you can reach your awareness into the everyone, you can link to future selves who are experiencing things. So it's like Peter Carroll also talks about like enchantment versus divination. Enchantment, you're trying to make something happen. Divination, you're trying to receive answers, right? And so he has this thing that you should divine short and enchant long. Again, there's the spatial bias, but I sort of think about that, so that if you think about like 5 minutes from now, Zach is more determined. I should ask questions about that. What's going to happen in 5 minutes? What do I need to know in 5 days? But if it's 5 years, then I have more influencing power. So I should be like, well, I want this to happen in 5 years, and so it's like it's almost like entropy, right? So that the my hand is going to look very similar in 5 hours, but in 5 years, who knows, right? My face looked very different 5 years ago than it did 5 minutes ago, right? And so what I feel like you can do is when I work with board games and my kids is that you do a lot of encoding or decoding, and so a roll of the dice. So if you want to encode, if you want to enchant, you think of the number you want and then you roll. Probability permitting, you're right or you're wrong, right? But if it's decoding, you roll it and it's covered, then you link to a future self who has seen it be uncovered. You download that number and then you confirm right or wrong. And so that to me is a way to almost practice magic with nothing but like board game probability stochastic processes. And so it's really kind of fun. And my daughter has this one where she goes like "Meow, meow, 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 meow," and then does it. And like I haven't like done the science to see if she's like more right or defying probability. But when she gets it, it's like this really cool moment of like, holy, I did it, you know?
Hey, and there's something to be said for just getting into that sense of fun. It's fascinating because one of the things that I explore in pop culture magic is board game magic, and the idea because board games provide a very they're world building, and so
Mm,
there's a specific set of rules. There's things you can or can't do, but there is that again that probability field, and we can take that same thing and apply it to our lives and say what are the rules that I'm playing by, whether my own or someone else's. Do I want to play with those rules? I like adding into that when you talked about the pliability of the future because you're right. There is this very real sense of pliability, and I think being open to that and being able to say, okay, like I don't know exactly where I'll be 5 years from now, but I can design for it. I can plan for it. I mean, I like to call that life by design, right?
mm,
Where do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? What's important to me? How am I going to get there? All of that's more important than getting stuck on the idea that, that I'm in a fixed outcome. I think one of the biggest disservices that people can do for themselves is getting stuck on the idea of a fixed outcome.
mm,
Yeah, there might be a fixed outcome 5 seconds from now, using the example that you had earlier, but 5 hours from now, there's a little more variability. 5 days, 5 months, 5 years, etc. There's more variability, and yeah, at a certain point, there is a collapse of function, so to speak, in the physical. Like at some point, this body's going to die, more than likely. But even that is not the end. It's just the transition from one state to another, and you're still able to access that probability wave. So instead of getting caught up in the idea of like a fixed outcome, play with it, play with the rules, have some fun. I think that's absolutely an essential way to do things and a great way to frame it.
yeah, for sure. And what I like to do a lot of is really project pretty far. One of the issues of that is like, who knows what the world is going to look like 50 years from now? You know, am I going to be around? I don't know. But like, things are going to change so far. So what I try to do is, I don't know if you're into astrology, but I what I try to do is I project to what I would call my Uranus return. So usually we're about 88 years old when this comes back around to where it was when we were born. And so I'm like, 88 is pretty good, right? Like if you make it to 88, that's pretty good. So, but what is the world going to look like when I'm 88? I mean, it's going to be pretty different because things are changing so fast. So, I'm like, well, the moon will probably still be there. There probably will still be forest, hopefully somewhere. So I'm like with me, my family, my wife, my daughters are behind me, and we're all looking at the moon, and there's a forest and a lake. So I want to be very general about that because I don't want to pigeonhole it and then, you know what I mean? That would make it less probable. But if I could be more general about the picture, but more visceral about like who's with me, then I'm not limiting it. It's still open. Then, probability permitting, on like my 88th birthday, I'll be in the mountains on a lake with my family.
There you go. And yeah, there's variability allowed for that. I think that's a great way to approach it. Well, Zach, I want to wrap up here and thank you for coming on. Again, we had to kind of do this as a two part. So, part one and part two will probably end up being released on the same day. I'm going to release this down the line, but tell us a little bit about who you are and where we can find you on the web.
Yeah, so I have a website, ZachWestI2C2.com. And I have both some magic courses you can get to through there and some musical courses that you can get to through there. I'm on Substack, on Instagram is musical circuits, and really it's all about using music to make magic. And so my online profile is just that. So hit me up. I have a lot of cool, fun ways to make magic with music and music with magic, and it's I always try to keep it fun, and because we're all kids inside, and that's the way we learn through play. And yeah, Taylor, I can't thank you enough for having me on. This was super great conversation. I loved it.
Yeah. Before you leave, we got a comment here. Thank you for sharing this live with us. I love working with potentials and timelines. You can warp nearby timelines. You push past any sense of structure and inhibition. You kind of weave the potential reality in more firmly than reality would could do. Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm,
He said, working out something called a timeline hinge, which isolates and negates negative effects on the timeline and weaves in positive effects inherently. Oh, that sounds cool.
yeah.
Using a fair amount of complexity because I'm doing something relatively simple, but I want to increase the longevity and effectiveness of the enchanted object.
Mm,
I find complexity comes in handy with making a permanently enchanted object. I think it's like stacking countless possibilities and effective methods. Um, I'll weigh in on that. That's an interesting perspective. And I'm just curious to see your thought as well, that. So what are your thoughts on that?
Um, well, if it's enjoyable, yeah, then definitely go with it. Get scientific. It sounds very scientific. And then like get somebody to verify it. I always like anecdotal stories. So if you can get an anecdotal story from you or someone else who's going down that path, to me that's the fun. That's where it's at.
Yeah. For me, I would say I'd be curious to explore what that stacking means. Like, what does it mean to stack complexity into it? I think I find like with my magical tools, and I actually develop a fair number of tools and processes. I like to keep it simple.
Mm,
Um, I see like the timeline hinge. That sounds like a pretty cool idea. Negating negative and enchanting for positive. And I'd be curious as to what the variables were. So sounds interesting. Maybe I'll pop the solo on for a live and we'll talk about it at some point. Before we go here, one final question for you, Zach. What's a word of wisdom or something that you want to share with us that we can take into the day? Something I ask everybody.
um, become an observer. Like really, like just have fun observing around you. Like think about entropy and just think about predictability and unpredictability, and just have fun watching things unfold. Because it's probability waves like collapsing into moments. And honestly, that can be fun just to observe.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and for weathering the technical difficulties. We did it, and thank you for everyone here who is live. Take care and have a great day, everyone.
Appreciate it.